Hi guys, welcome to the Law Firm Marketing Accelerator. Today we have Talaiya Safdar. She is a divorce attorney with a specialty in mediation located in New York City. Thank you so much for joining us. Please introduce yourself and let us know why you're here.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Victoria. I'm really here to talk a little bit about my practice, about how I've developed my practice, and why I've chosen to specialize in mediation and spread the concept of alternative dispute resolution, and hopefully that it reaches other attorneys as well.
Awesome. So you focused on mediation specifically. Can you talk to me a little bit about why this specific focus and how you differentiate yourself from other lawyers who maybe do all kinds of divorces?
Sure. So I do all kinds of divorces. I try to focus on mediation. I believe it's a different skill set that matrimonial traditional litigators have is a different skill set than a skill set of a mediator. What I try to do is move my clients from their grounded positions into perspectives. And because I've been doing matrimonial law for as many years as I have, I realized that doing the traditional litigious route really ended up having most of my clients financially and emotionally depleted. It's really not a matter of someone being happy at the end of a divorce. It's like whoever is in less pain. And I wanted to offer an alternative that might be a little bit work better for my clients than what I was doing. And that's when I started to really research into mediation and to start doing training and to start working through the courts and learning how it works best for my clients. There are obviously some matters in some cases where mediation is inappropriate and would never work, right? Domestic violence is one of them. And then there's also sometimes they're just very adversarial clients and it's a very high conflict situation. And in that situation, mediation may not be the best tool for resolution. I do strongly believe, though, that when you have two attorneys who are skilled in alternative dispute resolution, it is the most cost-effective and time-efficient way to resolve a matter.
So Talaiya, let me start with this question. Do people come to you seeking mediation, or are they coming kind of not sure what they want and then you kind of give them their options?
So I get both, right? So I have some clients who will come to me because they're seeking mediation. If you look at my website, most of the articles that I've written, most of the outreach that I do is in that area of alternative dispute resolution. I'm on various boards for divorce mediation. So it's really what my exposure is and my networking is. So that's the kind of clients that I get. Also, if you look at my website, I'm talking about amicability. I'm talking about, building bridges and restoring lines of communication, and people who are looking for a lawyer who's going to protect them in a much more aggressive way would not be inclined to contact me because of the way that I'm marketing myself, right? So I do get more of the clients who are wanting to do mediation, wanting to resolve things amicably. I get a lot of clients who may be in high conflict situations, but they have children and they want to try to restore the communication between both parents for the sake of the children. So it's not that I don't work in high conflict, I do. It's just the idea is that most of the clients who are even open to mediation are the ones who understand the benefits of it. And they understand the drawbacks and the costs associated with litigation beyond just financial costs, but emotional costs as well.
That makes sense. We have a lot of listeners who are, practicing in a big area of a law. So divorce, for instance. Positioning yourself in a niche market is scary for a lot of people because they feel like they will be kind of turning away all the other clients who don't fall into that niche. How did you face that when you decided, I just want to do mediation and I'm not going to be working with anybody else? Was this a scary decision? Has it paid off well for you in terms of, both profitability of your firm and maybe, your lifestyle as well?
So I don't think this is something that someone can do right off the start, right? If you're launching your practice and you're going to say, I'm only going to do mediation, you're basically cutting off one leg, right? Or maybe 75% of your foundation. But yeah, so I built towards it, right? It was a goal. It was a goal to get to a place where I could exclusively do mediation. I'm pretty much there now. The only cases that I take that are in court, I take for the purpose of bettering myself as a mediator, right? So I have reached the place in my practice where I have the luxury of choosing my clients and not just accepting everyone who calls me. But it did take me time to get here. And it wasn't something I did immediately because I couldn't financially do that, right? I wouldn't have been able to meet my expenses. And I have to tell you, most of the matrimonial lawyers that I do speak to who are opposing counsels on a variety of different things, they wish they could do just mediation. They wish they could stay outside of court. So I think there's, especially matrimonial law, which can really, really wear you down. I find that almost every single one that I have spoken to has been envious of the fact that I've been able to move outside of court and more towards negotiating outside of court and having more place of peacefulness, because it can be it's very high stress to be in court, family court especially. I don't do family court at all anymore.
What steps did you take to get yourself to that point that maybe other people aren't taking? What are they missing?
Well, I think that a lot of attorneys that end up in solo practices or smaller practices, they end up just taking the clients that call them, right? And it becomes this cycle, right? Because then you're spending all of your time on work and cases that you may not necessarily want, but because they're consuming your time, you're not able to allocate time to acquire the cases that you want. Right. So people can end up finding themselves in a hamster wheel. So it's really about taking a step back and making sure that you're utilizing your time most efficiently, which I know sounds very obvious, but when you're doing Monday through Friday, day to day, all of a sudden weeks go by, months go by, and you don't even know where the time went and how you manage to fall into a rut. Right. And I find that a lot of people, I find that some people might find themselves there, especially in family law and matrimonial law, where a lot of the cases turn around really quick. They may not necessarily be very high fee accruing cases, especially in the family law part. So you're spending a lot of time doing things that don't necessarily get you a lot of money.
Right. So did you stop taking some cases and then basically started to hold out for the cases you want? Or how did you know when was the time to make that transition?
So when I started to get people and referrals based on who I was and no marketing, right? So because through my relationships and my networking, people were calling for me specifically, as opposed to just looking for any mediator, I knew I was in a place that I could do that, right? It was just the point of now capitalizing on that as much as I could. And I did keep those cases that I didn't want. I just hired of counsel to do them. That's what I did for a decent amount of time. So I still had revenue coming from the cases that were coming to me that I didn't want, but they weren't consuming my time so that I could utilize my time in areas that I did want to.
And it's a very good way to walk towards your specialization, to get those cases and to outsource them essentially, whether that be through an associate or an off counsel or whatever way you want to go. Now you say, when I started getting referrals without marketing, and then you say you were networking. So I think networking is certainly a type of marketing. It's more of an old-fashioned marketing, and it sounds like you do very well with it. Can you share some of your tips on networking, and what have you found being the most useful to helping grow your practice?
So I think if you're going to talk about if marketing is networking, then I'm always marketing, actually, like all the time. I capitalize on my strengths as a individual. So I'm a very social person. I am in a lot of organizations, whether it's through my school, whether it's through my community, when I say my school, I mean my children's school. So I try to build networks and communities wherever I possibly can. And it's not a matter of, passing out cards everywhere you go. It's just a matter of building relationships with people. And then when that person needs someone, they know you're there, which honestly happens more often than not. And it's usually not, and it doesn't even have to be that person. It'll be someone that they know or someone. And that's how I built that really organic and grassroots. I mean, listen, I've been doing it for long enough that I have built enough of that. Now that you have all these amazing options and, AI marketing and digital marketing and building up your website and Google. And I mean, it's just so different now. The explosion of access, direct access for lawyers to clients is amazing now. We didn't have that 10 years ago, right? And now you do that. It's really important to, when you're utilizing these tools, to have a narrow focus so that you don't end up opening the floodgates and you have so many clients contacting you, and the majority of it are cases you just don't even want, right? So the idea for me was, originally I was building up my network. I was building up my reputation. Very much my practice is built on my reputation. I think mediation it's as good as the mediator, really. I suppose it goes for matrimonial lawyers generally too, but so much of it depends on my reputation, which I've worked very, very hard on maintaining and growing. That, I have judges who give me as referrals to matrimonial cases that come into their courtroom, and that's exactly where I wanted to be, and that's what I built upon. And now having that reputation, building on that with digital marketing is a little bit it means a little bit more, it carries more weight for me as opposed to just the blanket out there. For example, I'm not a personal injury lawyer where you could do that, where, you just throw this massive ads out there and you just catch whatever you catch, like a wide fishing net. No, it's more particular and focused because of the clients that I'm looking for and the area of law that I'm doing.
So there's a couple of things that you brought up there that are interesting. Yeah, the barrier to entry is very low now with digital marketing, but it means everybody in the world is doing it, right? Mm-hmm. So that means you have to compete with people who have huge budgets. Mm-hmm. And possibly be outcompeted by them. So when I take on a new client as a digital marketer, if a client comes to me and says, I want a very narrow focus, I know that we can hit that very narrow focus with more money. And when we can do that, we can compete even with the biggest guys out there because we are super targeted. So to take an example of personal injury lawyer, if a client comes to me and they're located in Los Angeles and they're PI lawyer and their budget is not one of those big PI firms, and they say, I want all cases, my response is, I can't do that because it's just a lot of cases. But if you come to me and you say, I'm a slip and fall lawyer, then that's a little bit of a different story. Then I can hit just that one area. And yes, we can compete with the big guys in just that one area. So for you, when you are an attorney and you're seeking marketing, it's very helpful to have your ideal client profile already created. And that takes experience, like you said. Mm-hmm. And for a marketer like myself, I can now create a website. I can now create properties. I can now create very important blog posts and pages that target that specific person, not any random person who might be looking for divorce. And certainly then we can take the ads and market the ads to that specific person, right? Because we do have a lot of control over demographics. But all that does take time. And when people come to me and they say, I want everything, my response is, then you're going to get nothing because, I can't do that at this budget. If I had the Amazon or Nike budget, then sure. But, so it's a very good tip. And I like that you started off as very general because while it's an ideal, it's hard to do, right? It's hard to start with your specific marketing area and kind of stick to that. So that's an excellent tip. Thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
So it sounds like you have done well with personal referrals and you haven't done a ton of digital marketing quite yet. But what in terms of any kind of marketing, what would you say would be the biggest failure or the things that you feel you shouldn't have invested time or money in, and why? What were the red flags when it comes to those efforts?
Oh, retaining people who are going to build up my SEO and didn't do anything. There are so many of these firms that are going to market for you, build up your SEO. And as attorneys, we're like working to burning midnight oil in the first place, trying to run our practice. We don't have time to sit and make sure the people that we are hiring for outside services are actually doing their job. And then that was probably the biggest. I mean, I didn't actually fall for it, but I almost did. I definitely spent some money in ads that were not targeted to anyone, and they just went out into the oblivion. God knows where they went. But because I did have this reputation, it didn't negatively affect me so much. The reason why I'm broadening now and going into digital marketing and trying to widen my net of clients coming in is because I'm trying to grow as a law firm. I'm trying to hire other attorneys, and that's why I'm widening that. I've also noticed that there's some big law firms that have put in a ridiculous amount of money in marketing, and they're sort of sucking, and they don't even have like local presence in certain areas, and they're just sucking up all of a decent amount of people who are Googling or going to them. But at the same time, I get calls from some of these clients who are incredibly frustrated with the support that's given there. So at the same time, you want to grow and bring in more clients, but you really do have to have the infrastructure to support them. Otherwise, you're going to destroy your reputation before you even have an opportunity to create it. And I'm seeing it happen with some very large law firms from the north that are coming into downstate, and they've done a lot and they've made a lot of money and they're doing very well in the North, and they're trying to take that entire model and translate it here. But ultimately, we as lawyers, it's not the same service as auto insurance, right? I mean, we have to build and make connections with our clients. We can't farm it out the way that, I mean, we don't end up like doctors that spend 5 minutes with each patient, right? We need to actually build relationships with our clients, especially matrimonial, right? And there is that relationship needs to be created. They need to feel like they can trust you. So as soon as clients start to feel like they are sort of running in a mill, right, and they're just another client in your roster and you don't really care about them, that's how you start to lose your reputation. And I think digital marketing is only going to get you so far. Ultimately, you still have to be effective at what you do.
Right. Well, I can market anything you want, but I need a product to market.
Yeah, exactly.
So to go back to your issue of spending some money on SEO or ads, or almost spending some money on SEO ads, that also goes back to there's no barrier to entry in my industry. There's no regulation whatsoever. Anybody could say they are whoever they want. They can pretend, they can show case studies that are not real, but whoever goes after them. And unfortunately, that results in a lot of scams. And I always like to share with my, of course, I ran my own digital marketing agency. And of course, I hope to sign lots of great clients, but I am not going to be the right agency for every person who is listening. And the red flags that I know exist for agencies like my own. The very first red flag is if you are being told you're going to be dealing with one person in sales and a separate person who does strategy, that can be a red flag because the salesperson may not understand the strategy. So how do they understand what they're selling to you? And who are you going to go in the end to actually ask, hey, this didn't happen? Now, in big agencies, often you will have several people handling things, but at the very least, the communication should be excellent and you should be introduced to the person who is going to be dealing with your strategy before you sign anything. And speaking of signing things, the longer your contract, the more of a problem you have. I don't have contracts at all. I have month-to-month agreements because A, I don't need contracts. My clients don't leave. And B, because if somebody doesn't want to be with us anymore, and it would be, I don't want, just like a good lawyer, I don't want a client who doesn't want me. Another red flag is very big promises, very quick. When I talk to people, you're in New York City, and I mentioned before I have several big clients in New York City in divorce, and unfortunately I can't take on any more divorce clients. But I know New York divorce market very, very well, and that's a tough market. And if anybody's telling you they're going to be starting getting your calls under 6 months, that is a big red flag. Anything is possible with enough time and money. That's what I always say. But unless you have a big budget, and you get very lucky, it's probably not going to happen. So there is quite a few red flags to look for out there, and you have to be very careful, and you should also speak to references of the marketing agency who are lawyers in your specific targets. So if I was, for instance, talking to you and you asked me for some mediation lawyers, I could provide you 3 off the top of my head, like boom, boom, boom. If they can't do that, then that's a problem. So I hope that helps a little bit. So you are very much into mindfulness, and I've read you have quite a bit of experience in it, and you talk about this. Can you talk about how you've incorporated mindfulness into mediation? How does it help you in your practice? What would you suggest to other lawyers out there who are kind of rushed and, maybe struggle with that a little bit?
It's fascinating because I almost wear 2 hats, right? So when I'm a mediator, I have to pull in a certain type of skill set. And then when I'm actually in court, I have to pull in a different type of skill set, right? So I think the idea really is that I try to incorporate mindfulness in my life generally, right? And how it works in mediation is like the active listening that I think most lawyers do, because we have to understand our cases to the granular detail. The only way we really do that is when we are actively engaged, right? And that's what I try to do in mediation, is I try to be very present and completely imbibing what my clients are saying, right? I have to be 100% alert and aware, and not only just hearing, but actually, really absorbing what they're saying. I try to use that in mediation because that's really most of the times I'm trying to look past what they're actually saying and understand what they're feeling and what they're trying to actually get at. So get past their positions into their interests. So that's what I utilize in mediation, right? It's a matter of just understanding and fully being aware of what my clients need, right? Which is very helpful for me generally in practicing law anyway, because it's a great skill to have, to be able to acknowledge and see what someone wants, even if they're not actually saying it, right? In terms of when I use that, how do I use that in mediation? It's really just a matter of active listening. I try very hard and I remind my clients all the time that I'm not a therapist. I don't bring up mindfulness in mediation. It is beyond my skill set to do that anyway. And so often the way that this works is that there will be side by side as the clients are in the process of mediation, they're also in some kind of supportive therapy, right? Either individual therapy or there's a divorce coach, and I work with a few of them, and they handle the emotional part, right? So they would be the ones who are actually talking about mindfulness. They would handle the emotional part so that when they're in the sessions with me, we're really focused on the nuts and bolts and the logistics, right? So we don't get spiraled out of control into different emotional spaces. But that's how I probably utilize mindfulness in my day-to-day life. I probably use it more when I go to court internally. But yeah.
I also sometimes, I am not a lawyer, but I work with clients, and I definitely utilize those practices. Well, I think any of us who work with clients that could potentially be a stressful situation really need to work on our mindfulness practices. Otherwise, things get a little out of control in your head. And then when things get out of control in your head, they get out of control in your world.
For sure. Yeah.
So it sounds like you have some really interesting networking strategies. Are you currently on social media, doing any kind of social media outreach, or are you doing like posting? What's your favorite social media platform?
So I really focus on LinkedIn, and I have a Twitter account. I don't really use Instagram too much, although everybody's telling me that I need to get on TikTok. I have zero idea what I'm going to do on TikTok though. But yeah, so what I do is I write articles, right? I write articles, I write blogs. I'm a writer. If anybody was going to ask me what I actually am, that's what I am. So I really feel very comfortable writing. Right. So that's because that's my skill. That's what I capitalize on to do any kind of social media. It's blogs, posts, articles, whatever. So whatever the attorney who's listening to this, whatever your skill set is, that's what you want to capitalize on and utilize it as much as you can to market yourself. So much of us lawyers, we can be really good at what we do, but in order to also flourish, we also have to be really good business people. And nobody teaches us that part, right? We get taught how to practice law, but not really how to promote ourselves. Podcasts like this, what you do is great. Sometimes the best lawyers are the worst at marketing themselves, which is really unfortunate because they're the ones that really need to get out there and be working with clients. But I think, listening to other lawyers, listening to podcasts like this, talking to you would probably assist them. It's just something that we're just never taught in law school, right? We're never taught that.
Yeah. So funny. Some of my best clients are amazing lawyers who didn't do any marketing before they came to me, or didn't do any digital marketing successfully before they came to me. Do you have any tips for LinkedIn for other attorneys? I know you said you write a lot. Are you interacting with other profiles? Are you following people?
Yes.
What's your strategy?
Yeah. And again, it's because, I've been doing this for so long. So I have a pretty broad network on LinkedIn, people in the industry and outside of the industry. I comment on other people's posts. I keep very active because then people are active on my posts. And it's also very informative. And I am also a bit of a nerd. So I enjoy going to these different conferences and symposiums. I speak on them. That also broadens my LinkedIn network, right? So all of this, it all connects in that way. And it's one of the hardest things, I think, for a lot of lawyers is to have time to sit down and write a blog post. We're already, tortured in all of the things that we have to write in the first place. So it is a difficult thing to do, but I think if you can set aside time weekly, which is what I do, I block 2.5 hours every week to write, and it's in my schedule and it's there, and I don't allow myself to deviate from my schedule. So that's what gets me forced to do it. And then I post it, and it's very helpful that way also.
So when you create blog posts, here's some tips for trying to make them more popular. I know you just hired somebody, but just for your own reference and for people who are listening, when you publish a blog post, first of all, what you're doing is you're creating something very unique on the internet. You're creating unique content. And why is that unique? Because you're a lawyer writing it. We write blog posts as well in my company, for instance, but we're not going to write something the way you will write it, right? What we're going to do is gather information that's already available and present it in a new way. Whereas you will probably include cases and, things that are brand new. So that is for Google extraordinarily powerful, extraordinarily helpful. But if you're not promoting it, Google will simply not know that your blog post exists. I did take a look at your site, and some of your blog posts aren't getting very much traffic, even though they're amazing. So how could you do that? For a company like my own has a system, which some of which you can do on your own. Post about it on Facebook, even if it's just one post from your company, linking back to the blog post. So you want to create a link. Post about it on Twitter. This is a blog post. This is the link back to it. Post about it on LinkedIn. So anything you create should also go on social media as well. Now, if you have something major going on, like let's say you just took a big case, or you can't discuss big cases, but something major. Let's say you hired a new associate, something like that. A press release is also a good option. Actually, there's quite a few. I actually have quite a few friends who have their own press release agencies, and I'm happy to provide you with some references. Putting things up on Reddit can be very helpful. Reddit is huge right now. That may require other interactions, and that may or may not be something you as a lawyer necessarily have time for, but it's an option, especially if you're active in a specific Reddit and you already are helping people solve their problems. Putting it on there could be very, very helpful. So what you want to do when you create a blog post, just making it is not enough. You also want to market it in some way. Now, we have a 50-step process for promoting any blog post, and that includes a press release, it includes a YouTube video, it includes a podcast. It's all AI generated, but they do look good for those purposes. They're not going to be converting humans, but they do look good for Google. So there's quite a bit of things, but you want to stay away from. The other thing is you always want to link to the pages you're promoting. So blog posts tend to be informational, whereas the pages, for instance, your mediation page is something where you want people to go and you want people to convert, right? They want them to call you. So a blog post should link to a primary page, because if somebody finds you on the blog, you want to give them an easy way to get in touch with you should they happen to be the right kind of client. Right. And that's something that an agency can take care of for you, or you can do yourself. That's basically sort of my blog post spiel, but I'm happy to discuss more with you and show you some of the process once we get off. So we don't have much time left, but I would love, it sounds like you have a very interesting practice. Is there a favorite client story, would you say?
Oh boy. Favorite client story. I don't know if I have a favorite client story, but I'll tell you a story that got me started really in what I'm doing now was years ago when I had a practice in Queens. I had a client contact me who had, it's actually quite a sad domestic violence story, but she was only 18 years old. She was brought here from another country, and she was married to a U.S. citizen, and there was a lot of financial and emotional abuse and control and stuff. But why I bring this story up is because she actually ran out of her window of the basement. This is when there were phone booths, so you can imagine how old this story was. Goes to a phone booth, finds my ad in the yellow pages. This is how old this is, and called me in my office collect. And my receptionist at the time, she took it. I mean, she told me this is what it was, and I accepted it, and I spoke to her. And why I'm only telling the story is because that young girl, 18 years old, had so much strength, right? To know, being alone in this country, an immigrant in this country, not knowing her situation, but knew her self-worth to say that this is not, I know that this is not acceptable for me. Mm-hmm. I think of her all the time. Because I think that level of awareness is so important, and which has guided me. So when I say that I don't take the clients that won't benefit me, I think of that girl. It's about prioritizing yourself, your mental health, right? Acknowledging your limitations, but also your strengths, and then capitalizing on those strengths. It's one of the moments in my life that was transformative, and it came from a little 18-year-old girl who was in a horrible situation, who pulled herself out with really most people would not have been able to. So
It's such a hard thing to do.
yeah, really, really
For
inspirational.
fully grown women, it's such a hard thing to do. To do that as an 18-year-old, yeah, you gotta be tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Have to have strong will, definitely.
So what's next for your firm? Where are you looking to go?
So I am actually working on a book. So I'm writing a book about mediation and how to advocate for yourself in a mediation. So it's like a guide through a divorce mediation process. So that's what I'm working on for the next 2 months. I'm also, like I told you, I've acquired a new firm, not acquired, I've hired a new firm to take care, do my SEO build out. I'm going to redo my website, and I'm throwing out a wider net to bring in more clients, because I'm planning on hiring attorneys, and I will have a presence in the family court again, which I've not done. And I'm meaning through of counsel, or through actually associates, I'll have a presence. So that's what my plan is in the next year or so. I still want to focus on mediation myself personally. Even the attorneys that I plan on hiring, I plan on instilling the importance of mediation and alternative dispute resolution. I hope to spread that awareness to other matrimonial attorneys and family attorneys. Sometimes I think that some of my opposing counsels are the most difficult piece that I have to try to overcome when negotiating. And then sometimes it's just wonderful, right? And I think it's a matter of trying to understand that our clients are in very, very vulnerable situations, usually when we're doing matrimonial or family law. And because they're in vulnerable situations, sometimes they can be their own worst enemies. And when we are advising them, sometimes what we need to do is advise them that maybe it's not the best thing to be so adversarial. Maybe the best route is to try to negotiate and to settle, especially when there's children involved. Sometimes dialing up I think most of the times dialing up.
Yeah, there's certainly some ethics issues involved there as well.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Well, Talaiya, thank you so much for coming on this podcast, and I appreciate you sharing your story and your tips. Do you have any last words?
No, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Victoria, for calling me on here. This was really interesting. I think I have a lot more to do growing wise myself, marketing wise. So it's not like I'm an authority on this at all. But one other thing I think I'd probably throw out there for anyone who's listening is that there are, as attorneys or as human beings, we tend to get stuck in our cycle of how we're doing things. And now technology is advancing so quickly and so rapidly that there are so many resources that are out there available for us to make our lives easier, that sometimes it's very important for us to break out of the routine that we've been in and look at some of these tools that are available that might actually make us better lawyers, might make our time use easier, make our automatic workflows, for example. There's so many things that we can do and so many different services and resources out there. That would be my one probably takeaway, is that hopefully some lawyers will look at what are they using for case management software? What are they using for tasking? What are they using for email software right now? I mean, there's so many different ways of working in Slack and different organization groups where you can really streamline workflows. And that has been very helpful for me. I mean, I'm 100% virtual. Two of my assistants are in Florida, and we're able to do this because of all these amazing technology platforms that are available to us now. I think a lot of lawyers are not using, at least none of the ones my age.
Thank you so much, Talaiya. I really appreciate it. Stick around so we can finish the upload.
Okay.